One.
Lights out.
All right. Welcome, everyone, once again to a brand new episode, a brand new show of SleepTech Talk, the sleep podcast, with your hosts and friends, Robert Miller, Emerson Kerr, and me, Dr. Gerald George Moneycarot, coming to you once again in this new year for another new show. But before we start, I want to give you a really quick message from our sponsor and friends over at React Health. React Health, formerly 3B Medical, a leading provider of sleep diagnostic, and respiratory products. Their Luna G3 family of PAP devices are FDA approved and offer a cellular modem standard in CPAP, APAP, bi-level, and bi-level ST modes to treat a full range of sleep disordered breathing. Their magnet-free line of PAP masks include the Siesta Full Face, Siesta Nasal, and Rio 2 Nasal Pillows mask, all of which have less than a 1% refit rate. Visit our friends over at www.reacthealth.com or contact your React sales executive to learn more. With that, hey, Robert, why don't you tell us what's going on today?
All right. Thank you, Jerry. It's good to be back in the saddle. It feels like it's new again. It's been a little bit since we recorded our podcast episode, so I'm excited today. We have the founder and CEO of Gem Health. They're available. I think the website, and Brian, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, is mygemsleep.com. Brian Sauer is the founder and CEO of Gem Health and has a significant background in the healthcare industry. We're excited to have him here with us today. Brian, I'll let you tell a little bit more about your story, about your current company and what you're trying to build at Gem Health, and then maybe even a little bit about your background to help to provide some additional context about your connections in the healthcare industry.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thanks, Robert, for the introduction. Thank you all for having me today. I think the question, kind of starts with why sleep? Why am I focused on sleep? The reason I'm focused on sleep is because I'm actually a patient. About a year and a half ago, I was one of those people who was snoring pretty constantly. My wife would drown me out with the sound of a sleep fan until one night she told me, hey, Brian, this isn't just snoring anymore. You stopped breathing several times. You need to get this checked out. And I, of course, like many, men who are kind of in the middle of their lifespan, was not really too keen on doing that. I said, I'm not going to a sleep lab. I don't really like the idea of a CPAP machine. I don't know much about them, but I know they seem kind of weird and seem like something I don't know that I want to do. And I'm going to try to avoid this as long as possible. I really started to think about it and think about all the symptoms I had headaches on a regular basis. I was tired all the time. And my wife, saying you need to do something about it, actually, it gave me the kind of prodding I needed to do to get off my butt and do something about it. But even somebody who was, 20 years as a healthcare veteran, I spent most of my career at United Health Group at a company called Optum. I started working on my own situation and found it to be really confusing. I didn't really know where to go. I didn't know if I had to start with my primary care doc. I didn't know if I had to then go to a sleep specialist. When I tried to get to a sleep specialist, I was told it was going to be a really long wait to get into one. So I started to look for my options online, actually, and I found a solution to do an at-home sleep test. And I said, I didn't even know these existed. Fast forward, I did my home sleep test. They connected me up with a CPAP machine. I started the CPAP regimen and hated it. Maybe it was a foregone conclusion because I had in my mind had thought I was going to hate it. But really, it was a struggle for me to adjust to it until I started looking at my data and seeing, wow, this thing's actually working. My resting heart rate came down. I wasn't waking up with headaches. So I became a believer, but it was only because I was super stubborn to power myself through it. And I just felt like there had to be something better. There's a lot of disconnects. There's a lot of jargon. There's a lot of confusion. I didn't know what insurance covered and didn't. And this is coming from a guy who'd spent, like I said, 20 plus years in the healthcare space. And I was thinking to myself, if I'm having this trouble, what's going on with everybody else? At the time, I kind of planted that seed. I didn't really do much about it because at the time I was the CEO of a mental health company. And what we were doing in the mental health space is we were breaking down the barriers for access to care for depression, anxiety, and stress support, which at the time, now there's a lot of companies in the virtual mental health space, but at the time there weren't a ton. But they were really trying to tackle a problem that it actually ended up being similar to my problem in sleep apnea is how can we get people timely access to care? How can we provide them options that aren't maybe the standard options they're used to? How can we stigmify the condition because it's something that people have sometimes they're embarrassed about, and how can we make sure that people get the support they need so that when they do start on a treatment or a regimen to find out what's going on with them, they don't feel alone. They don't feel like they're the only person going through it. So fast forward about a year after my initial experience, we ended up selling the company I was leading at the time, the mental health company. And I really kind of came back to that seed that was planted with my own experience and felt like, hey, there's got to be a better way to solve this problem for people. There's got to be a better way to solve it for myself. So I actually sat down and started working on kind of a product design. I spent a lot of time talking with industry experts. I talked a lot of time talking with clinicians. I'm not clinical myself. Spent a lot of time talking with insurance companies. Why is it so complicated? Why are these policies so stringent? And really, I just kept coming back to there's got to be a better way to tackle this. And if I can solve this problem for myself, I might be in a position to help solve this problem for others. And then it went from a seed to something I couldn't unsee. I felt like everybody I talked to, they had sleep apnea, or a brother had a sleep apnea, uncle, father, mother. It was everywhere. And I started to realize that it is a really meaningful condition to tackle. And that's when we started Gem Health. We started a year ago. Our actual 1-year birthday is tomorrow on January 4th. And in that time, we launched our first product, Gem Sleep, really to help tackle sleep apnea for people. So what we are is we're a virtual sleep clinic. We also are a DME provider. What we've done is we've vertically integrated all the experiences that otherwise were kind of split up and separated, made them into one simple process for the patient. Patients can come to us, and within a matter of days, they can get set up for a diagnosis of the home sleep test. They can then go through treatment options with us, which include everything from traditional CPAP therapy, but also oral appliances. And then importantly, on the back end of it, we have a really robust support system to help make sure people don't fail, which is one of those things where I was almost a failure and really felt like if I hadn't powered through it, I would be one of those 50% of people who started and didn't continue through with their treatment. So that's a bit of my story and a bit of what we've been working on with our Gem Sleep product here at Gem Health.
Hey, Brian, so tell us, what was the most difficult part of putting this sleep program together? As you've seen a lot of different options, and I know that through some conversations you and I have had that you've chosen some things to be able to add to the service that would be a value add to the patient, but you've also chosen not to include some things that might have been the easy button in some cases as well to plug into the program. So how have you sort of differentiated those types of opportunities and things to build the program?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, just starting kind of from a philosophy perspective, I'm a big believer whenever you design a program or a product, there has to be no dead ends from the user's perspective. And that, I think, was the biggest opportunity because there's a lot of dead ends that I found in sleep apnea care, and they're caused by different policies that are out there, different reimbursement strategies. A lot of programs have seemingly been put together based on what the clinician needs, but not necessarily what the patient needs. And that can be a disconnect in terms of helping a patient get through a process. So for me, the most difficult piece was actually taking a step back and trying to understand why all these things were the way they were. And then trying to then put them back together in a fashion that made more sense from the end patient perspective, even if that meant in some situations we were breaking some of the rules that we didn't even know we were breaking in terms of putting a process together. We've had a lot of conversations with payers, and they've said, are you a DME company or are you a virtual clinic? And the answer is we're both, which has been hard for them to kind of wrap their head around. And I actually heard one of your earlier podcasts one of your guests was speaking about the fact that a lot of the different parts of that supply chain, if you will, have been separated and specialized over time. And I think a lot of it has come down to kind of reimbursement practices and policies rather than what makes the most sense for the patient. So what we definitely try to do is put together a program that is so simple that my 75-year-old father can do it, and so simple that that anybody who has questions can get support in a really simple and easy fashion. But all the work we had to do, from the logistics to the various different provider partners that we had to put in place, to the various different suppliers we had to put in place, it was a really heavy lift on the back end. But our goal is to make that as kind of simple and light as possible for the patient on the front end. But that meant at times we had to try some things and see if they worked or not. It meant at times we had to say no on some things that we didn't feel like they fit with our model. And in some situations that meant that it took us longer, to build the process than we wanted to. But all that being said, we were able to build our initial offering and get into the market in about 6 months. We started in Minnesota, which is our home state, but we're now available in 40 states across the U.S.
What's the typical customer journey or patient journey look like through Gem Sleep? I'm very curious to hear about that.
Yeah. Well, the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure that we can actually be of service to you. So a number of digital companies that have come out, they've been very focused on kind of the consumer experience, but maybe they have trouble marrying that consumer experience with the actual, clinical model, or they may be heavily focused on the clinical model and kind of forget about the consumer experience. So our goal was to combine those two things to really pull together the best experience possible to drive outcomes for people. But it really starts with a simple assessment. It's the stop bang assessment, which I'm sure everyone's familiar with. We first try to figure out, are you somebody who may be a good candidate for our services? If not, we don't want to, try to get you to sign up for our services. We really only want to get you to sign up if we think that you're somebody we can help. From there, we offer you a home sleep test. Our home sleep test is administered by our clinical team. So you need to have, a clinician's order to be able to send out a home sleep test. Once the home sleep test is at your doorstep, once you do the test, we then within 3 to 4 days will have an actual determination and diagnosis, and all that information flows through our web portal for you to be able to see your journey. At that point, we'll then provide options for you if you do have sleep apnea, such as CPAP or such as oral appliances. We have a network of dentists that we've built out who specialize in dental sleep medicine to connect you with that option if potentially CPAP is not appealing to you or you tried CPAP and it's failed. And then on the back end of it, we have a robust coaching and content program to allow you to learn from your coach, learn from your peers, and stay connected. And so far, we're seeing really positive results from CPAP therapy. 75% of our patients are sticking with CPAP therapy beyond 30 days. As we all know, that first 30 days are critical in terms of therapy, and we're really trying to buck that trend of seeing a 50% fail rate from CPAP, which has been pretty common over the years.
Coaching is an interesting part of what's happening in the sleep technology world. It's sort of a moving target as it evolves. So when you think about going back to Jerry's question and building off of it, the clinical pathway of the patient, how does the coaching process work, and what does that journey look like from end to end? When you finally reach adherence, maybe a step further, what's the ongoing process after adherent with whichever therapy they landed on?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's really two different important elements in terms of what patients need. One is when they raise their hand and say, I need help, I'm struggling with this. And I'm too often, we don't ask people what they need help with. We put them in a position, we say, here's everything you need, here's some instructions, good luck. And that just really doesn't cover it for most patients. So from that perspective, we're creating, we've created mechanisms for people to be able to provide us, questions, feedback, real time, through chat services, through communities that we're building to gather information. The second piece is us being able to pull information in. So to start, we're pulling information from PAP therapy, for instance, through what the machines tell us, but we're also working to integrate wearables such as Whoop bands, Apple Watches, et cetera, so that we can see what's going on with individuals and can coach them proactively. Not in a big brother manner. We're not there to say, hey, why aren't you being compliant? We're there to say, what's going on? Is there an issue with the mask? Can we swap that out for you? Is there an issue with sleeping position? Can we work through that with you? Is there a behavior change that we need to work through together to get you to the point where you can feel kind of graduated from the perspective of that initial change? And that kind of harkens back to my own experience. The first 5 to 10 days, I wanted to throw my CPAP out. Once I adjusted to it and realized it was working and had that positive affirmation, it really made a difference for me. And that's where we think data can play a big role as well. We're showing people their information in a consolidated fashion so they can see that it's working and see that it's making a difference in their sleep, but also in their health.
Hey, Brian, sort of the next step, and I'm assuming that there is a bigger plan beyond sleep apnea for Jim Health. Knowing that you have this mental health background as well, I mean, mental health and sleep, those two things, I know that my mental health isn't good when I don't sleep well.
Yeah.
So I know that there is certainly a place that sort of fits in the gap there between the two. What does that look like for Jim?
Yeah, well, one of the first things when I brought on our chief medical officer, Dr. Michael Howell, one of the first things he said to me is, why just sleep apnea? Why aren't you thinking about other, elements of sleep as well? Most people who have sleep apnea have other sleep conditions, and also many people who have, sleep conditions, like you said, Robert, have, they have a lot of anxiety about the thought of not getting enough sleep, or they have depression because they're not getting enough sleep on a regular basis. So there is a huge connection. For us, it was deliberate for us to choose a specific condition, really try to be the best that we can in it before we expand, because what we didn't want to do is we didn't want to be peanut butter, vanilla, kind of touching all these different things and saying we're touching everything in sleep, but really, falling short from that patient's expectation. So we're working to get really strong in sleep apnea, and then that will allow us to then have those kind of near adjacent conditions, the insomnias, et cetera, that people may be facing in addition. But we're being deliberate and trying to, conquer one, category and do it really well, and then expand, rather than trying to just be everything to everybody and not in the end actually being able to help people across those different conditions. But there is a really strong, strong plan for us to expand out to other sleep conditions, because we do recognize those connections.
Brian, as a new business, I'm sure you've had a lot of changes over the last year, and it's probably hard to nail down one thing, but what has really been your biggest aha moment when you were like, I didn't really see this coming. It was a big surprise, but you learned a lot from it as a new business.
Yeah, well, I might cheat and say two things. One is I didn't have a full appreciation for the CPAP shortage when we started planning this business. I knew there was, potentially supply chain issues. I heard about the Philips recall. Next thing you know, we're trying to launch a business where, one of the main therapy elements is in short supply. So that definitely was a big aha for me in terms of, wait a minute, that was, not definitely in the plans. The other thing is just, the other big thing is just how important your team is, in terms of launching a business. Definitely, recognized that we needed to build a strong team. But the biggest aha moment was that we actually moved even faster in some regards than I thought we were going to, because I kind of took my hands off of the steering wheel and said, I don't need to drive everything. I can really rely on a strong, set of team members, and we'll move much faster, and we'll be much more thoughtful than if I'm trying to drive everything versus trying to use a team approach to really drive things out. And we've seen that in terms of our results. Half the product design at this point is from my initial sketch. The other half is things we've learned, we've changed and adapted with the strong team of people that we put in place.
Hey, Brian, I know that for most online providers that they enter into the space, and initially it's a cash model where a patient's going to pay cash for all of the services. I assume that is part of your initial launch, but then maybe you could talk a little bit about payers and insurance coverage, sort of long term.
Yeah, absolutely. We did fall into that model. We started off direct to consumer, not because that was our destination, but because we wanted feedback. We wanted to understand if the program we had put together was something that people agreed was helpful. We wanted to have learnings. We wanted to have, understand what was working well, understand what we need to improve, and ultimately also understand if somebody was willing to pay their hard-earned dollars for a program like this, then that also opens up the door for greater utilization once it gets covered as a benefit. So from that perspective, we are moving into the payer coverage. Where I'd say at the finish line for a number of large contracts that are going to allow for coverage through insurance. But as we get coverage through insurance, one of those things that that people are also going to have to kind of work through and consider is the changes from high deductible health plans in terms of how that changes reimbursement for services like this, because in some situations in terms of the insurance reimbursement, they may actually be just as good off paying out of pocket as via insurance based on some of the insurance reimbursement policies. But ultimately, what we want to be able to make is this as accessible as possible for people. There's a timeliness, for accessibility. There's kind of an ease of use for accessibility, but there's also that affordability element, which we think is really important to unlock the total potential to help those people in need.
Brian, my job is timekeeper, and we are approaching time. So before we close, is there anything that you really want to get out to the audience before we close the show that we haven't touched on yet?
I guess I would just say, if we can be of help to anybody who's needing our support, we're here for you. We're really a purpose-driven company in terms of us wanting to help people get to that next level of health. I've become a bit of an evangelist for therapy based on changing my own health and my own well-being, and if we can be of that assistance to anybody else, we're here for you to help, and we're open to feedback as well. We're very agile and very nimble in terms of our ability to move quickly and make positive change. So you can find us, Robert, shameless plug, Robert already gave it, but you can find us at mygemsleep.com. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. I was just going to ask you, where can people find more information? So mygemsleep.com. Fantastic.
That's right.
Thank you so much, Brian. We sincerely appreciate you joining us here today and joining the show. And everybody out there, we thank you so much for joining us again today for another show. Joining us, please continue to give us the likes, the thumbs up, the subscriptions. We can't thank you enough and we can't appreciate you for all the support you've given us over the past several months moving into the new year. And we ask you to just continue to doing that. Be sure to spread the word out to all sleep techs out there, anybody who's interested in sleep, especially today's topic, really interesting, what all is out there. And with that, we say thank you so much for everything. We look forward to the next show. And until next time, lights on. All right, time for some pre-cals.
Hello.
The docket today, I think, Robert, you got something to tell us?
Yeah, I think first of all, we may need to run a survey of the listeners to have them go to YouTube and check out the length of Jerry's beard. I don't know what happened over the Christmas holiday, but he's starting to turn into Santa Claus. I'm just saying.
He's the dancing Santa.
Yeah, I tell the kids all the time, hey kids, it's Santa Claus.
There you go.
Yeah, then they run away. I don't know why, but.
Hey, and let me also say one more thing too before I jump in about our guest today. But we have a lineup of fantastic guests, that are on the docket. So I want everyone to know that we didn't meet with everyone. We met with a lot of great people in 2022, but there's still a lot of folks out there that you're going to want to know their story and know what the companies are that they work with and what they're doing. That's all helping to improve the world of sleep medicine as we know it. So stay tuned for 2023. So that being said, we have today with us Brian Sauer, who is the CEO and founder of GEM Health. GEM Health is GEM, by the way. They are an online sleep provider, and they certainly are it feels like they're sort of starting out with, focusing on sleep apnea. We'll hear more about that from Brian, but, in general, I think it's all about access to care and really a focus on outcomes for patients as well, and a lot of follow-up that may not necessarily be provided in the standard world of how sleep apnea is taken care of today. So a really specialized approach, albeit through a virtual solution.
Sounds really interesting. A lot more people are, or rather, we're starting to hear more and more about things being done online for health. And I think COVID was what really sparked the necessity for that, whether it's telemedicine or in this case for sleep apnea. COVID had really changed the way we are looking at or approaching medicine. We had to very quickly adapt to the change, and healthcare changed as a result of that. And I think for the better. So it'll be very interesting to hear what Brian has to say about what they offer for the public.
No, I completely agree with you, Jerry. I think that, what telehealth did was what COVID did was disruptive, and it brought everyone Robert and I had a lot of exchanges during COVID trying to figure out solutions to problems, that we were both facing during that time. And it became, the old saying, that these kinds of things become the mother of invention. You begin thinking outside the box, and you look at a situation like this. And what I hope we hear today is, his story, because, we're all inspired by these kinds of things. But, what did they learn, and what was the journey that Brian went on to get to where he is today? And I think it's going to be fun to hear that. It's going to be instructive, but it's inspiring to hear someone who is looking for another way to reach more people to treat their sleep disordered breathing. And that's ultimately what we're all in this to do. So I'm looking forward to hearing about that.
All right. Well, guys out there listening, hang on just a second and get ready for the show. All right. That was quite a show. It was, what do you guys think?
No, it was fantastic. I think Brian, his story is exactly what I hoped for. It was a great journey, a lot of learnings, some aha moments that are instructive to any new business, leader, any leader in general, of how to trust their people. But it's such a comprehensive solution for anyone looking for an answer for getting their sleep disordered breathing tested, treated, managed with what sounds like a great program.
What do you guys think about, for me, rather, I thought was interesting was the fact that, hey, he ran a company that offered mental health solutions to people. And then he had this issue with sleep apnea and said, hey, I want to do something about this to make it a whole lot easier for people. And he just jumped in and did it. And along the way, he had to learn. What do you guys think about that?
That was exactly where I was gonna go, Jerry, is just talking about the fact that, I can't imagine, being diagnosed with something and even reluctantly myself, pursuing the treatment for it. And then, oh yeah, by the way, I'll start up a new company to figure out a way to make it easier for other people. I mean, and what's interesting, with so many sleep centers, so many online providers, you would think that the space would be overcrowded, but it just still shows you how many undiagnosed and untreated patients are out there, that there's a need for these new companies, even in even if it's a hybrid, compared to sort of a traditional model for sleep care.
I agree. The innovation is amazing with the fact that hey, he found a little niche and started working on that and kept expanding, and it's being successful so far. And on top of that, what I found interesting was during the CPAP shortage, that's when they launched, and
And he survived.
yeah, exactly, survived and able to continue to thrive. So that's pretty wild.
Yeah, that's beating a lot of statistics right there. To have a startup and headwinds like that and still succeed tells you a lot about his fortitude and his team. I mean, he must have an amazing program there to withstand that.
Have you guys noticed that Emerson likes to use all these big words like statistics and
Hey man, when you're from you have to do what you can. When you're not as pretty as you are,
hey,
you got to leverage what you got.
Hey, he elevates the conversation.
I will agree to that.
I don't
He
know
does
about that.
elevate it. Yeah. Yeah. Talking about being pretty, that's why I wore the glasses today, so that I could cover this much of my face for you all to
Nice.
balance it out, right? So
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Oh my God.
oh man. Well, I think it was a good show. I really like it when we have these innovators that come on and tell us the new things that they're doing. Of course, I love it when we have somebody who's been in business for a while and doing the same thing and refine their craft over and over again. But it's always interesting to see somebody who's had no experience. I was just a CPAP user and I wanted to do something about it. It's always fantastic to hear something like that. All right. Well, folks out there listening, thank you so much. And until next time, cheers. See you in the next show.